Hello everyone, welcome to the Master of Applied Linguistics webinar. My name is Helen Zhao. I'm a lecturer in Applied Linguistics in the School of Languages and Linguistics in the University of Melbourne. I'm the Master Program Coordinator this semester. Today, I have the pleasure of being your webinar moderator. In a moment, I will introduce you to our panel members, but before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this webinar is being brought to you from. In the spirit of reconciliation, the University of Melbourne acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their eldest, past and present, and extends that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank each of you for tuning in to watch this session live. A warm welcome to everyone. Now let me welcome today's panel members. With us, we have the Deputy Associate Dean, Graduate Studies in the Faculty of Arts, Associate Professor Carsten Rover, who will introduce Applied Linguistics and why you should study Applied Linguistics at Melbourne. We also have the ESL Program Convener, Associate Professor Naomi Storch, who will delve into our ESL program and talk about how you can develop graduate level English language competence. We have two of our current Master of Applied Linguistics students, Alex Xingchen Wang, who is enrolled in our on-campus program with a specialization in language testing, Sarah Guinan, who is enrolled in our online program, also with a specialization in language testing. Behind the webcam, we also have a group of Melbourne staff who are available to answer any questions you might have throughout the webinar. If you would like anything clarified, or if you have a question about something that hasn't been covered, please send us a message using the chat window on the side of your screen. There will also be some time at the end for panel members to address any questions you have for them. Lastly, I'd like to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded and you'll receive an email with a link to that recording. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's webinar. Shall we start to move the slide? Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to start with a highlight of the strength of the program. We're very proud of being the top 1 university in Australia and ranked the 22nd in the world for linguistics. The Master of Applied Linguistics program offers subjects that cover a broad range of applied linguistic fields, such as second language acquisition, sociolinguistics, language testing, transcultural communication, bilingualism, technology and language learning, language curriculum design, language program evaluation, etc. Such a wide variety of subject offerings is seldom seen among Master of Applied Linguistic programs worldwide. We are also one of the few master programs that provide solid quantitative and qualitative research methods training. The methodology training helps students develop research skills and prepare students for the coursework in the program, and also prepare students to do a minor thesis or future PhD studies. Students who do a minor thesis will carry out an independent empirical research project over the course of a semester under the supervision of an academic staff. They will produce a substantial piece of master thesis of 10,000 words. Some really successful minor thesis students continue to pursue a doctoral degree in our university or elsewhere. We're also extremely proud to have the world-leading language testing research center in our school, so that our program is able to provide students with branded training on language testing, which is a highly desirable professional area in a discipline. In our program, students interact with a highly international peer cohort from different backgrounds and work experience. Students often do collaborative project-based coursework and develop the language and social skills of working with intercultural partners. The ESL program is an extremely important component of our program. A lot of students in our program are international students whose first language is not English. The ESL and graduate certificate subjects help students to study effectively at university by developing academic English language competence at the graduate level. Finally, I'd like to highlight that the course structure, the subject offerings, and exciting opportunities that students have at Melbourne Uni all aim at boosting students' academic and professional knowledge so that they will graduate with a competitive edge in language teaching, language assessment, and language program evaluation. We would love to work with excellent students who have the motivation to learn new knowledge and the aspiration to be successful in future career. Now let me hand over to Professor Carsten Rover, who will give you an overview of the program. Over to you, Carsten.
Okay, thank you, Helen. So our program, our Master of Applied Linguistics, offers 5 specializations. TESOL, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, is by far the biggest of our specializations, and it allows you to focus your study a little bit in the area of second language learning and teaching. I'll say more about the subject in a little while. It was already mentioned the language testing specialization. The language testing specialization is probably the second biggest one in our program, and it is supported by the resources of the Language Testing Research Center, which is pretty much the only one of its kind in the world. There are not many universities left that actually teach language testing in depth, but we are one of them. The technology and language learning specialization allows you to focus on the role of technology in language teaching, learning, and research. The English language specialization is a broad specialization that has a focus on sociolinguistics. The modern languages specialization is a bit different from all the others, and it is actually being phased out as of next year. So it's not one that we are promoting at this point. Can we go to the next slide? So I want to talk to you a little bit about the subjects that we offer, because to give you an idea of the range and the depth of what you will be experiencing in our program. So the majority of our incoming students are in our 200-point program. And the 200-point program means it has an entry requirement of a bachelor's degree with the appropriate grade point average, but you can come from backgrounds other than language study or linguistics or teaching. So students from any background can do the 200-point program, which is why this program includes some undergraduate subjects to get you up to speed on the linguistic side of applied linguistics. Looking at the 2 years in the program, in your first year and in your first semester, you might do subjects, and this is really just a sample. This is not a kind of fixed program that you must follow. You do have choices in there, but you might do subjects in your first semester like second language acquisition, which is a subject that I have taught for years and that Helen is teaching now, gives you a comprehensive overview of SLA. The Secret Life of Language is a first-year undergraduate subject that is a great one-semester introduction to what linguistics is. And it covers all the major areas of linguistics briefly. Syntax is a subject that many students find very interesting, an in-depth look at how grammar works across languages. And language, society, and culture is another undergraduate subject that gives you insight in the way language and society relate to each other. In semester 2, we have our introductory flagship subject, Concepts in Applied Linguistics, which will give you an overview of the field of applied linguistics, so that from an early point onwards, you already know how things connect to each other and interrelate. We have found that students in the past felt that it took a while for them to understand what the connections are. So we're trying to cover that quite early. Grammar and use is an applied grammar subject. And as Helen was mentioning, the subject quantitative methods in language studies is one of our flagship subjects to train you for doing quantitative research. And a lot of students, I've taught the subject for 15 years, and a lot of students coming into the subject are very scared that it's going to be heavy math. And, you know, let's face it, most of us are in languages because we didn't like math all that much. So they're scared that it's going to be heavy math and statistics, and it's not. It's an amazing subject that teaches you statistics in an applied way that actually help you to do research in applied linguistics. I'm not going to go through all of the subjects because I find them entirely fascinating, but you might not. I'll just pick out a few very relevant ones. English phonetics and phonology is our graduate level introduction to the sound system of language. There is a focus on English, and this is the case in many of our subjects because we all, everyone in the program speaks English at the very least, but we do have examples from other languages as well, and all the lecturers supervise theses and dissertations that focus on other languages. I currently supervise a dissertation about learning pragmatics in Mandarin Chinese as a second language. Language curriculum design is a great subject. It's an elective, but it's a great subject when you do a specialization in TESOL because it actually teaches you how to design curricula, which you very often will have to do when you come into teaching situations where there's very little and you have to build something from scratch. And in semester 2 of your second year, sociolinguistics and language learning follows on from language, society, and culture from semester 1 of your first year. So it's a graduate level subject of that goes into more depth and breadth. And language testing, as Helen mentioned, and both of our student panelists today are specializing in that. Language testing is our flagship subject, developed by Tim McNamara, one of the top language testers in the world who recently retired. Our flagship subject that gives you a deep and broad introduction to the science behind language testing. And then you have the option of doing the minor thesis, the applied linguistics thesis in your final semester. As Helen said, the thesis is an independent research project. Of course, you have a supervisor, you're not on your own. Other students are doing theses that you can talk to. But it is a very substantial piece of work, and it is really designed to prepare you for a PhD. The requirement to get into the thesis is quite high. We require quite a high grade point average for that. And it is something that you really need to think about whether it's right for you, but it can be a very rewarding experience to actually, after you've been hearing and hearing and hearing about other people's research, to actually do your own research. And many theses have led to publications later on and onwards to PhDs. So this is the 200-point program. This is our biggest cohort, students coming for 2 years for on-campus study. But we have shorter programs depending on your background. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we also have a 150-point program, and you can see the subjects are pretty much all the same. Except in the 150-point program, you cannot do undergraduate subjects. So only in the 200-point program can you do up to 4 undergraduate subjects. The 150-point program is all about graduate level subjects, and it requires, the entry requirement is a bit higher. So we require that you have some relevant background from your previous study or work experience already. Many of the it's the same suite of subjects, just organized differently in different programs and specializations. You can see here the English language specialization, and a subject that we hadn't looked at before was discourse and interaction. That's a subject that goes into depth about how to analyze extended discourse, a very worthwhile subject for looking at sociolinguistics, but also SLA and language testing. Very worthwhile skill to have. Second language writing, Naomi's flagship subject, talking about how people develop their ability to write in a second language. Most of the other subjects we have covered. Bilingualism is worth noting as well. It's an elective subject that comes back every few years, and bilingualism focuses on the cognitive and the social aspects of speaking more than one language. As you can see here in the 150-point program, there is no minor thesis. So you can definitely decide to do your Master of Applied Linguistics without a minor thesis. It is not required to do a minor thesis at all. Can we move on to the 100-point? So this is the 100-point program. This is the highest entry requirements. So it would require something like a master's degree already in a very cognate area, or very extensive work experience in applied linguistics, language teaching, that sort of thing. And it is a very fast program. So if you do the 100-point program at full time, you'd only be studying for a year. And it feels rushed, let's put it that way. So you do have the option to opt for a longer program, even if you qualify for a shorter program. So even if you were qualified for the 100-point program, you could opt for the 150-point program, just to give yourself a little more time to get your head around everything, which I would highly recommend. Can we move to the next slide? I know we're giving you a lot of information today, and you may feel, even though this is recorded and you can rewatch it at your leisure, you may feel a little bit overloaded after all of this. So all of this information is, of course, on our website. So our study website here about the Master of Applied Linguistics has sample course plans on it. It talks about what careers you can go into with applied linguistics afterwards. It talks more about the entry requirements. So you can use that website to get some more in-depth information about our program. And of course, you can always email and ask the staff at Melbourne University and ourselves. We're always happy to answer questions you might have. Can we move on to the next slide, please? At the moment, because of the coronavirus situation, Melbourne Uni is teaching online. So all the teaching is happening online. That is actually not something very new for us. So our program has been teaching online for over 10 years. We've had an online program running concurrently with our on-campus program. And under the current circumstances, we have expanded the online component and beefed it up, given it a lot more attention. For semester 2, we will definitely continue to teach online. So if you're an international student hoping to study in semester 2, and you might not be able to come physically to Melbourne, or you might not want to physically come to Melbourne, you can do our program online. You can, if you wish, start our program online, and then when the Australian government opens its borders, you could come and join us in Melbourne if you so wish. So we build in a lot of flexibility here. Our online teaching at the moment relies very heavily on Zoom class sessions. So we teach our normal class sessions just via Zoom. It's a fairly similar experience to this webinar, except there's more interaction. We upload recordings, just like recordings of this webinar will be uploaded. We have office hours and student consultations via Zoom. We're all sort of discovering that this is actually really easy to do, and we might never want to go back. Now, we will eventually go back, but it's actually a very good replacement to the face-to-face. All materials are provided online. We've always been doing that. So you can access everything online. Our assessments are fully online. Most of our assessments are writing papers or answering short homework assignments, so there's not a big problem there. Under the current circumstances, you are able to study less than full load online. So if you wanted to start in semester 2, but you're not sure, so in this upcoming semester, but you're not sure if this is a good idea under the current circumstances, you could do a smaller load of subjects. You could just do 2 subjects instead of 4 subjects. That is allowed at the moment. Also, our rules allow students to withdraw from a subject after about 4 weeks. So there's a cutoff date after about 4 weeks. And if you start online and you find it doesn't suit you at all, and it's really terrible and you really can't handle it, you can still withdraw and get your money back, or defer until the coming semester when hopefully you'll be able to come back here physically. Can we go to the next slide? On to Naomi.
All right, great. Thank you, Carsten. So we'll of course come back to you with some questions from the audience a little later. I'm going to hand over to Professor Naomi Storch, who will talk about our ESL program. Over to you, Naomi.
Okay, thank you. I will go talk about the ESL program, but let me just say that I coordinate the program, the ESL program, and teach second language writing in the program. And it just occurred to me, I actually was a student of the MA program at Melbourne University and a PhD, so I have a perspective of both a student and a teacher on the program. Okay, so the University of Melbourne is quite unique in that it offers you the possibility of doing ESL subjects for credit as part of your degree. It's also unique because it offers quite a range of subjects to choose from as electives. And we currently have 5 subjects that are available. One is called Presenting Academic Discourse, and then there are 4 subjects which form part of a graduate certificate in English for the global workplace. There are 4 subjects, I'll talk about them in a minute. And you can choose any, we recommend that you probably do at the most 2 subjects that are ESL as part of your elective if you want to improve your English language proficiency. So let me talk about the subjects that you can choose from and give you more information about them. The next slide, please. So the first one is Presenting Academic Discourse. We've been offering that subject for many years now, and that subject aims to develop high levels of academic English skill that you need for successful graduate study in English. For example, the kind of issues that we cover in this subject is how can I make my writing sound more academic, or how can I criticize, for example, the work of other scholars when I do a literature review? How can I sound like an expert in my field, the whole issue of writing with authority? And how can I manage difficult questions from the audience in a seminar presentation? So we cover both oral academic skills and written academic skills. Next slide, please. The graduate certificate subjects, unlike Presenting Academic Discourse, aim to develop professional writing, professional speaking, intercultural communication, and self-editing skills. So the kind of issues that we cover are related more to workplace communication. So for example, how can I communicate both appropriately and effectively with supervisors, work supervisors, as well as study supervisors, but also colleagues and clients in both oral and written form? How can I avoid intercultural communication? How can I use available editing resources more effectively? And how can I become more aware of my accent and pronunciation? And we use a lot of packages, for example, that you can use, online packages to record yourself and test your pronunciation. Next slide, please. So over the years, and we've been offering these subjects for many years now, over the years, what we've noticed is that students gain improved writing in terms of accuracy in their writing, as well as how to write more appropriately for academic and or professional purposes. They also enhance their academic speaking skills and professional speaking skills in terms of being more fluent in your speech, more accurate in your speech, and speak with greater confidence. We've done research on that and show that students who participate in these subjects actually do improve. But an added benefit, particularly for those of you who are language teachers or who plan to become language teachers, that by participating in these subjects, you're also exposed to different approaches to teaching languages. And that's something that a number of students have commented on they really enjoy from doing these subjects. Next slide, please. So if you would like to find more about these subjects, please don't hesitate to contact me via email, and I'll respond to your question. I tend to respond very quickly to emails. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. That's great. So it's now our pleasure to hand over to Alex, who will be talking about his experience of studying at Melbourne. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex, and glad to see you guys in the webinar. This is my second semester, and I'm studying the 150-point program of Master of Applied Linguistics. And before this, I majored in finance and studied in the Australian National University. So how come I end up doing a language program? Well, I worked as a language instructor back in China for a couple of years after finishing my bachelor degree, and that's when my teaching career started. Then I realized that I might need, a formal tuition in linguistics to reinforce my background knowledge. And also, when you worked for a while, you would miss the uni life. So I decided to come back to Australia and back to school. As you know, the School of Linguistics and Applied Linguistics in Uni Melbourne is in the leading place. So I'm so honored to be one of the students here. There are many fascinating places and facilities on campus. My favorite spot is on the second floor of the Balliol Library, which is connected to the very modernized teaching building West. There are plenty of seats near the giant French windows through which you can see the lawn, the tall trees, the sunlight floods in. It's just beautiful. And you can see so many students there are fighting against assignments, reading a 1,000-page textbook. This is exactly the picture you may see on Twitter in the final exam period. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, the campus shut down at the moment. Classes are moved from the offline to online, and we barely have opportunities to see each other. But the school reacted quickly, and teachers paid a lot of time and effort to ensure the teaching quality. To make change would never be easy for anyone. So, but we see so many positive things. Now I'm given more time that I can manipulate. For me, I'm currently taking 4 courses. Among them, research in applied linguistics is rather interesting and practical, even though I was frightened by its name, continuing research in the first place. But as a prerequisite for taking the minor thesis, it helps me establish very comprehensive research framework and introduces me a variety of practical research methods, methodologies that I can draw on to prepare my own projects, not only in this subject, but also in others like language testing. I didn't know much about language research before. Even we were required to do a lot of readings, articles, journals. I know it's annoying sometimes, but when you really know what you are reading, what you're doing, things become fun and exciting. I used to skip the data section in an article because there are a lot of tables, numbers, and statistical terms that just terrify me. And I thought doing research was not my thing. It's kind of torturing me. But things have changed after I took the subject called QM, Quantitative Methods of Applied Linguistics. Even I haven't finished it. I could understand most of the data analysis in the paper, or at least know the logic behind them. In order to help students approach QM in applied linguistics in an easier way, Professor Carson Rover, one of the guests today, even co-authored the book called Quantitative Methods for Second Language Research, which is closely related to what we may encounter in the real-world issues and cases. Now I'm writing a research proposal which investigates the relationship between vocabulary size, vocabulary depth, and especially the collocation knowledge. So I can combine what I learned from the research class to align the framework for my study, from the language testing class to design the instruments, and from the QM to analyze the data that I collected. Those things were not even possible for me a few months ago. Now it's near the end of my second semester, and I'm preparing several final projects so I can integrate the theoretical frameworks that I have learned in class into practical practices. And if everything goes well, I would do the minor thesis to further my study next semester. I'm quite interested in the language testing, especially computer-based and adaptive testing systems. Because we've seen how remote and online learning, teaching, and testing are important to us today. And if I'm qualified, I would consider to do the doctoral degree after that and see what I can do and contribute to this discipline. Maybe in the future, I can help develop language tests like IELTS, TOEFL, but all these are built upon the increasing understanding of this discipline and the efforts. Of course, with the help of the school, lecturers, and classmates. this is my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your experience with us, and it's great to know that you are gaining so much academic and professional knowledge in the subject. So yeah, I just want to remind the audience now that you can send in any questions to through the chat function on the side of the screen, and our background staff can manage those questions and direct them to us so that we can address them at the end of the Q&A session. All right, so next we have Sarah Guinan. Sarah, tell us about your applied linguistic journey and the awesome experience you have at Melbourne Uni.
Thank you so much. So it's an honor to talk with all of you. I am also in my second semester. Here you can see the courses that I've taken in the first and second semester, and then the classes that I plan to take in the future. I'm also considering a language testing course, and these are the classes I'm excited to take. All right, next slide, please. So first, I wanted to go a little bit more into my background, and you might find some things that you can compare to your own background, or you can come from a totally different field, like Alex had said, he came from finance. And I find that with a lot of the students in the course, not everyone has a linguistic background, and that is okay. So I'm from the States, but when I was 16, I did a Rotary Youth Exchange in Switzerland. And during that time, that was my first time really immersed in learning a second language in the environment. So I learned German and Swiss German and thought, this is something I might want to go into. And it was at that time that I was applying to colleges. So I decided to major in linguistics. And I did a very theoretical linguistic course back in California. And I loved the course, and I even participated in 2 independent studies, but I actually did those independent studies in applied linguistics. So I definitely favor the applied linguistics side, and we'll talk more about that later. But during that time, I decided I want to go back to living abroad when I'm done. So I moved to Hong Kong to teach, and during the time here, I was looking at how my students were learning second languages, and like Karsten had referenced before, seeing what are the problems that they're having. And I thought this was really interesting, and I wanted to research into it further. So I decided to look at master's programs, and I decided on the University of Melbourne, and this is where I am today. So I wanted to talk to you about how I'm hoping to bridge my master's course with a future job afterwards. Next slide, please. So with each class that I've taken, I have found that I have new passions that have emerged from that. The first course I took was research in a second language acquisition, and this really increased my passion on continuing research post-graduation. I love reading research papers and seeing what is going on in the field. So I thought maybe after this I might do a path in academia. And then I took second languages acquisition as well, and with this course I was able to look at how the course related to my students' learning, and that helped me become a better teacher. And currently I am in language testing along with Alex, and this has made me passionate about creating proficiency tests for the future and improving a lot of those tests. So each of the classes I can find something new that I'm interested in, and I can always relate it to my current life or my current job and position. Next slide, please. So here's the bridge. Doing my master's in applied linguistics, I should finish in the next few years. I'm definitely doing a slower pace. As Karsten mentioned, you can do just a couple classes if you're doing the online version. And I do have a full-time position here, so I'm doing full-time work with my classes. So I'm taking about 2 classes at a time. I'm hoping after this master's, I can have more positions more opportunities to teach abroad in other schools, possibly to go into developing language tests or in curriculum development. So I know we want to know how our passions can really pay the bills later. These are some of the jobs or examples of employment that you can have after you finish your master's. Next slide, please. And as I said, my background was in linguistics, but if you're considering possibly doing a linguistics or an applied linguistics, they're very different fields. And the video talked a lot about what applied linguistics do. What I've found on a student perspective is that it's very applicable. Obviously, the applied linguistic aspect. I think the readings and subjects are more interesting in the applied linguistic field, because if you are working or have background in teaching second languages, you will find that there's a lot of overlaps. The finals have also been useful. As Alex said, a lot of the times we'll have to create a research paper, create a test, and if you have a future interview for a field that you want to go into, you can bring out those finals as sort of a portfolio of what you've done in your master's, and I find that really useful. And the professors prepare you for those final projects. You're not going into it with no background. They're really helping you with each step so that when you have that final project in the end, you're proud of what you've done. And there's also a lot of collaboration in the applied linguistic field in University of Melbourne. You're working with other students in some of the final projects, and I found that you can learn a lot about yourself and how you work with others and really get more ideas through that. Next slide, please. And then finally, I just wanted to give some tips for online students. I know there's not too many of us, but it seems like all of us are online now. One is to really take advantage of the Zoom office hours. Even if you don't have a specific question, you can just have those office hours and talk to the professor about how you interpret the reading. I think this helps a lot. I know in my first semester with Helen, we were Zooming maybe once a week. It was a lot just to catch up and talk about the readings and feel more engaged with the course. When you're online, it seemed you might feel like you have that separation, but it doesn't have to be like that. Really take advantage of those Zoom office hours can help you a lot. And similarly, you can also create WhatsApp groups with peers in the class, even if they're online students, just to talk about some of the readings, talk about the homeworks, collaborate on projects. Right now for our language testing class that Alex and I are in, we have to collaborate for our final. So these WhatsApp groups can be really helpful. If you're in China, then WeChat groups. And then definitely if you're an online student, doing the assignments and readings as soon as possible really helps, especially if you're doing a job on the side. You don't know when emergencies can come up, so it's really helpful to do that as well. And then change the way you think about your notes. I've seen some students take notes on their lecture slides, just copying everything down. I think maybe doing Cornell notes or more web design. There's a lot of obstacles of being an online student, but I think there's also a lot of benefits. For one, you can work at the same time and relate your work to what you're studying, and I think that can be very beneficial. And just not to get too discouraged. I know your grades might not be where you want them to be because you're doing so much work on the side, but know that doing both is a great option as well. And that's all for me. So if you have any specific questions as well about the student side, feel free to ask us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome. Those tips will be really helpful for future students. I hope both of you will successfully achieve your career goals. Well, that's it for our speakers. Can we move to the next slide? Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Before we move to the Q&A session, really quick, we'd like to introduce you to an interview with a distinguished Melbourne-based applied linguist, Professor Tim McNamara, that Carsten mentioned, who is also the founder of our Master of Applied Linguistics program. You probably have heard about his name before. It's our pleasure to present you here a clip of the interview in which he talks about his career in applied linguistics. We don't have time to play this video during the webinar. You can watch the video via the link on the screen at the moment. Okay, next slide. Now that we have just a bit of time, we'll just have time for one live question from the audience, and some of you want to know the specific pathway of students in our programs after they graduate from the program. So I'm going to direct the question to Carsten. Would you like to answer that question for us? Thanks.
Sure. Yes, of course. That's a common question, and it's a valuable question, of course. So the typical direction, the typical career direction that people go into with a Master of Applied Linguistics is some type of language teaching. That is the traditional thing to do a Master of Applied Linguistics and then teach language at a tertiary level. In the past, that was often English, but increasingly it is other languages as well. So Chinese as a second language or foreign language is growing rapidly at the moment all over the world. So our degree is by no means English specific. Even if you do a TESOL specialization, you learn about language learning, language teaching, and all the things around it that can go with any language. So language teaching is probably the most common career outcome for people afterwards. Other possible outcomes are working in administration, often language-related kind of jobs in language testing, which is also quite a big field worldwide. In all countries, there's some degree of language testing going on. Careers in careers in business. So one of our graduates started his own company, a test prep company that is now growing rapidly. So this is a pretty open degree in terms of careers. There are typical paths like language teaching, testing, but it's not like dentistry where you finish it and you become a dentist and then you're a dentist and that's all you're ever going to be. So you have a lot of options with this degree. And what we're trying to do is put you in a position where you can be where you have the best opportunities to take it further.
All right. Okay. All right. So thank you, Carsten, for answering that question. So we've gone over time now. Our webinar has come to an end. Thank you very much again for tuning in and listening to the Master of Applied Linguistics webinar. I'd like to wholeheartedly thank our panel members. We really appreciate your insights and for sharing your expertise and experience with us. If you have further questions, you can use the link available on the screen at the moment to submit an inquiry. Our staff will get back to you as soon as possible. You can also find a lot of detailed information online about the course, entry requirement, how to apply, and all of those amazing opportunities that we talk about today. I really do encourage you to do your research, to explore the wonderful things that the University of Melbourne has to offer. And we welcome to see you on campus soon. Stay safe and goodbye for now.